Hey everybody, this is Cody Knight 22 here, and I'm coming at you today with episode number 8 of Cody Talks Fanfiction, and this is going to be another special episode. I'm not going to be doing much talking about a specific fanfiction because, ta-da, NobleMETA will. For those of you who do not... Great way to start the video. For those of you who are unaware of who NobleMETA is... oh, hey, you're right behind A Harsh Reality. He is an author for RWBY. He has only written stories for RWBY, much like myself. Yep. He has, let's count them out, almost two stories, over 100 followers, and one story over 100 favorites. He's most likely best known for his work of Life of a White Rose, which currently has 143 reviews. Whoops, that's the wrong line. He currently has 225 followers and 163 favorites. He is, and another accolade to that story is because it is the 2, 4, 6, 8, 25 minus 8 is what? 17th most followed story on the website.
Is it 7?
Actually, right behind, A Harsh Reality.
Is it 17? I thought it was 18. I thought it was only 18. Well,
let me count, actually. 25, 24, 23, 22, 21, 20, 19. Oh, you're right. I can't do math.
Yeah.
All right, so 18th on the list, right behind A Harsh Reality, which I can no longer find anymore because because of the fact that it's got a new cover. But anyways, so that's what gives him credibility to be talking on this. And I do recommend everybody go and read Life of a White Rose. So yeah, just say hi.
Yeah. Hello. How's it going? Yeah, we're going with like the whole idea of like, oh yeah, it's 18th most followed story. I actually just had it recently where this most recent chapter put me over one of my favorite stories of all time, Red and White, as well as putting me over In Love with the Gardner. And, of course, Red and White happens to be tied for my most favorite story besides A Red Stained Remnant, which, isn't that one of the stories we're going to be talking about today?
No spoilers. So, basically how this is going to work is I'm just going to play the role of host, because I'm a lazy fuck. And so I'm just going to be going off of stories that I have talked about in the past, but people might have differing opinions. So while both of us are working, you will only see my screen, just so there's no confusion. So while people may have, some people have differing opinions, and I thought it'd be interesting to get another author in. Just so everybody knows, I am planning on doing more episodes like this in the future, and it is not only limited to NobleMETA. If you are an author who would like to, I'm going to give you these, by the way, because I'm going to need more stone soon. Right. If you're an author who would like to potentially potentially participate in an episode like this in the future, just let me know in the comments or private messages or whatever the fuck you want to do.
Okay.
So, I guess it's time to get working. You go mine. I'm gonna continue building this mansion.
All right.
The first story that NobleMETA will be talking about today is going to be Icy Rose by A-rav.
Yeah.
This is definitely the story that I had some of the most points to talk about in the past. So, reading the description as always. What happens when an icy girl is set up on a date with an energetic rose? Art credit goes to my friend Lazy Cats. This is one of those stories where you don't really get a good summary off of the summary. So, basically summarizing this story yet again for anybody that does not remember, Weiss and Blake are very good friends. Blake sets up Weiss on a date with her girlfriend's sister, RWBY, and her girlfriend is Yang. And then everything kind of kicks off from there. It's a fluff story, realism AU, I should say. And I definitely had a lot to talk about this in the past, so I will let, I forgot your name, Noble, take the lead on this one.
Yeah, so the deal with Icy Roses, obviously Blake and Yang, of course, as Cody said, they set up Weiss and RWBY to get together. Now, they do this because it's like, well, they know each other. They already know each other, so as a result, it's like, well, okay, well, since they both need to get better people skills, then why don't we just try getting them to be friends, and maybe, who knows, they might end up being together at some point, which... obviously, that does happen. Actually, it happens very early on in a story. Now, with this story, it's mostly just lots of fluff, and so there really isn't too much plot, although some of the later chapters do happen to have a good plot to them. And I think that those plots are pretty decent, with, like, Weiss getting
Don't spoil anything.
No spoilers. Okay. All right. No spoilers.
Yeah, no, I don't want to spoil anything.
Yeah. Okay. But yeah. But anyway, overall, I think it's a really interesting story. One thing in regards to like what you were talking about with saying it's like, oh well, the way that the characters are portrayed it doesn't seem accurate. There's some discrepancies in the way they act, but I think that the way that it's portrayed is perfectly normal. If you think about it, one of the things you talked about was that the way RWBY just goes and she initiates everything sexually. Now, that could be attributed to, well, who really was the one who taught her how to do that? That being Yang. And so, well, since Yang is the only one really who was in her life, obviously she's going to learn everything that she did from her. So, well, considering all that, and considering that RWBY's a very young, impressionable character, then I'm not surprised that she's doing that, and I'm actually kind of a bit surprised that it isn't that way in a few more stories. It's like, well, it's a case of monkey see, monkey do, in a sense, if you think about that. You get what I mean with that, Cody?
I do, but kind of like the way that comes off to me is I can see the points that you were making, but the way that it kind of came off to me was more along the lines of when RWBY being the one that initiates everything. Sure, monkey see, monkey do, but I don't think that Yang would have been quite as blunt with RWBY, just given how protective she is of her in general. I thought that Yang might be more so protective around RWBY, and that being said, it may be monkey see, monkey do, impressionable character, but it still seems very off for RWBY, in my opinion. That was what I was coming from there.
Well, yeah, it's obvious. It's obviously it's not going to be really in line with everything, but there's a case. Sometimes it's like, well, who else would really be there to teach RWBY? Yang's the only one around, and I think it was one of the chapters, the chapter where, well, I'm not going to spoil anything, but RWBY is talking with Yang about how, and RWBY and Yang's are saying like, I need to set a good example for you, and then RWBY's saying like, well, you want to know what kind of example you've been setting for me? And it's just like, what do you think of when you hear the number 69? It's like, heh, that's a sex thing. It's like, yeah, that's the way Yang. Yeah, she'll act like that. Even she's been acting like that even around RWBY. But it's like it could be small amounts, but even the smallest amount is enough to give a bad impression on people, especially from a young age. Considering that Yang is also 2 years older than her, I figure that, well, RWBY is young, she still doesn't understand, and if she sees Yang, even if Yang is trying to keep everything together and not have anything go wrong, well then it still could end up being that way. RWBY could still see all this kind of stuff from Yang, and dang it, I keep falling off the ledge. But yeah, it's one of those things where it's like, you can see it, but you don't understand it, and the person who's trying to keep it from you ends up still letting you see that anyway. It's like a case of whether or not she sees it or not versus whether or not Yang tries to push it away or not. RWBY could still end up seeing it somehow. It's because it's one of those things where...
I see what you mean there.
Yeah.
And I would like to just say on an off note, the chapter that you were referring to, I know exactly what chapter you're referring to. That chapter is one of my favorites just because of the way that he handled Yang's reaction to something, and the fact that I've been getting a lot of crap for that, for the way I have Yang react to the exact same thing in my stories. So I'm just going to go ahead and say good on A-rav.
Yeah.
Just side note.
But yeah, going off of that, with the whole thing with Yang's reaction, yeah, it's an understandable reaction. It's a perfectly fine reaction. I just feel like sometimes the way that RWBY react with your stories, I know what you're talking about. It's like the way that you have RWBY and Yang reacting. Yeah, that's the way it is. But with that, I was like, okay, Yang can be the way she is. That's fine. Let RWBY be more reactant as well, trying to keep Weiss, trying to protect Weiss as to her degree. And it's like, okay, she wants looking out for Weiss, and this is me speaking from having a girlfriend and experience in that. But I know her. She has two younger sisters and a younger brother, and she said that, well, she said that it would all depend on the situation. It's like, okay, well, if it was someone who she didn't know, then she can understand not being being unreasonable with in like not even caring. But she's like, because one of her sisters is like has been with someone for like years, and if they were to do anything, my girlfriend, she'd be like, oh, okay, about time. It's one because it's different because, well, obviously, first of all, we're not girls. We wouldn't be able to understand that in a sense.
No,
So, but
no boobs.
yes, no boobs for me. But yeah, it's one of those things where it's like some sisters would understand it better, but yeah, it's like at least give Ruby some kind of reaction to like try and look out for Weiss in a sense. I mean,
Yeah.
it's one of those things where it's like, okay, this can work out. We can figure this out. Yang, just don't go overboard. What was I saying? Oh, with the whole reaction, with Yang's reaction, it's understandable, Yang's reaction, but at the same time, it's at least I'd say like give Ruby a reaction. If she cares about Weiss, she would at least say something. She would at least stand up for Weiss for something, not just sit there and just listen to Yang over Weiss all the time. Or even if it was like Blake who was doing it, it was just
You want.
all right.
Yeah, I don't think I mentioned this beforehand, but the way that A-rav handles Yang, I thought it was really well done. I thought that he captured a lot of parts of Yang. Yang is probably one of the easiest characters, though, to feel like somebody's doing well because we know the least about her,
Yeah.
which is just kind of an interesting thing. It's harder to make those judgments, but I thought that he handled her really well. And it's also, you brought up the fact of how somebody's going to react. I always picture Yang reacting to everything, especially involving RWBY, a little bit more violently than what most people would consider necessary. So I definitely thought that was with A-rav. But you brought up, when I brought up the out of character points, this is just one thing that kind of felt very strange early on into the story to me, was Weiss's reluctance to protest. What did you... and Weiss felt very out of character early on in the story. So to me, what do you think of that? Overall.
Well, with that, it's what I think of that is, okay, you have Weiss who is she doesn't have that many friends. In that story, she doesn't have that many friends, so she doesn't really know how to interact well with other people. So in that regards, she needs to learn, like, basically she needs to learn how to deal with people. And so in a sense, it's a matter of, okay, doesn't really know what to do, so she's just gonna try something and hope for the best. That's what I got out of it. And it's another thing where it's like, okay, well, this has been working, so why change it? So it's one of those things where it's like, okay, it works, I'm not gonna mess with it, so because if it works, don't break it. But yeah, it's a matter of sometimes it's just a matter of human principle, human instinct. And I saw that, okay, if I don't do this, there's a chance that RWBY or Yang or Blake would not be friends with me, so I don't want to lose that. At least that's what I think. It doesn't have to be exactly accurate, but it seems to be that's the vibe I kind of got. It's like she just didn't want to ruin what she had. And edit and mulligan number one.
All right, apologies for the cut. There was some mic issues, but because of the way that Weiss is, you wouldn't picture her being maybe, or because she doesn't have a lot of friends, you wouldn't picture her being maybe more guarded about things like that, where somebody were to come along, especially given her background in this story, which is like many others, the rich heiress. You wouldn't picture other people being like, hey, or RWBY being, hey, let's go out and do this, this, and this, and she'd be like, no, I don't think I really want to do this because I don't know how to do this, and kind of fight back against RWBY, albeit somewhat unwillingly, regardless of.
Well, yeah, I'm not surprised. I'm actually a bit surprised that there was at least a little bit of pushback at the beginning, and then more towards like the middle end of the story where it is now. Then I would understand it more. But I agree that it's a little bit off that it's just instant not reacting that way. But I see it the way I see it, it's like, okay, Weiss, she realizes she doesn't have that many friends. She realizes that something is amiss. It's like even I think in like the first chapter, it talks about how Weiss doesn't really like Weiss knows that she doesn't have that many friends. I guess. I mean, I'd have to reread it again and all that, but I have to look through that for that specific detail. But it's like you have a character.
On chapter 1.
Yeah, you have a character that doesn't really know how to open up, and so it's like the only way to learn how to open up is to actually go and do it. You're not gonna go and find some less teacher to show you how to open up. You just gotta go out and do it yourself. But from that,
What about Professor Peter Port?
Professor Port, you say? No, but yeah, it's like there's only so much you can learn from like that standpoint. It's like you have Professor Port. He would be like, okay, I can teach you I can only teach. There's only so much you can teach anyway, and there's some things that you just have to learn for yourself, which it also it could apply to anything. It's like you look around, you see how people interact with others, and it's just like you just learn from them just how to react to people. And it's like so I guess it's like she just saw early on that okay, you gotta give people what they want at times, even if it makes you a bit uncomfortable. Hello?
Editing this video is going to be a bitch. What do you think about the way that he or she, I don't actually really know, portrayed Blake?
Handles who?
Blake.
Blake? I think,
Everybody's favorite kitty cat. Yep.
yeah, I think that he or she handles Blake pretty well. Like with Yang, there really isn't much that you can do because you only know so much about Yang. So it's like, well,
now your mic
I
is
can only
cutting out,
do
just
so
you know.
much, and we only can go off of first impressions. So it's like, all right, well, this is what the impression is that I've gotten from her. So, well, might as well just run with it. But it's like, all right, we got this. With Blake, there's a lot more that you can handle. There's points where you can, talk about often in the story, but I think that he or she handles Blake pretty well for the most part. Definitely the idea of keeping Blake's Faunus heritage a secret for
if I remember correctly, Blake only makes brief mentions, but I remember there was one scene because as always you got to handle the Faunus, the whole Faunus debacle with Blake. I thought it was handled oddly in the story. I just remember reading it and thinking about how very strange it seemed, and I don't remember why I thought that, but I definitely remember thinking about it that way.
Well, I figured that too. Not every author is going to be able to get everything right every time. Obviously, I mean, you read some of the things I have. I will fully admit that I'm not as good as some of the other authors on here. I'll be one of the first people to admit that I definitely need improvements. I'm sure, and I know you can agree with me on that one. But yeah, it's just all just a matter of just perspective, I guess. Like I think for the most, I mean, like I haven't read this story in a little while. I'd have to reread it again to get more detail in. But overall, I think that he handles the characters pretty well for the most part. Like maybe a small discrepancy here and there, but overall, it's a pretty decent. I think he does a pretty decent job, or she, because we don't know if it's a guy or a girl or not.
Are there any other points that you would that you want to bring up for this story?
Yeah, I definitely think that this is one of the stories that you definitely should go out and read. Like maybe not the first story you read, but it's still a story you should read because it's a pretty decent story. It has it has a lot of fluff in it. I like fluff. I like reading a lot of the fluff stuff. So
who doesn't like fluff?
Yeah, fluff. But yeah,
there's only so many times I can read Blood Rose before I have to read fluff.
Yeah. There's only so many times you can read a certain topic, but fluff. It's like honestly, I feel like you can never get enough fluff. But
It's it's definitely fun. It's always fun to read fluff.
Yeah, and especially with the later chapters, when it gets more, there's more of a plot line into it. Then
The later chapters almost had me favorite that story. I almost favorited that story.
yeah, those most recent chapters, if anything, those chapters really make that story amazing. Oh, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
but
Overall, out of 10.
out of 10, I give it an 8.5 out of 10. It's not the best, but it's definitely not one of the worst stories out there. It's definitely one of the
Higher
it's
than
definitely
what I gave it.
What? Say that?
Higher than what I gave it.
Yeah, I know. Usually what happens is if I like a story, if it's really good, it'll do really well, and if it's still a good story, it'll still do pretty decent with me. It's just maybe not get a really great high grade on it. But this is one of those stories. It's like in the middle of the card for me.
Yeah, all right, that's fair.
Yeah.
I remember picking 7 because I thought it was, because I picked it like that one being the middle, and I just remembered 7 is technically a C. So just C is like the middle grade. All right, next story is going to be In Love with the Gardner by now EleaDancingOnAPin, formerly Angel Dancing on a Pin. Total chick, not a dude, like I had thought. All right.
Yep.
Ruby is the only Gardner for the Schnee family with a huge crush on the Schnee heiress. All the other ones quit, probably because of having to deal with the Schnees themselves. Weiss is a spoiled rich girl who doesn't even know her admirer's name. Will Ruby's crush be realized when she saves Weiss from an assassin? White Rose, some bumblebee. I would like to point out, I didn't actually realize that assassination, not assassin. I didn't realize that was actually in the description. I was really hesitant about saying that when I first recorded the episode. Totally forgot that was in the description.
I'm sorry. I don't know what's going on. I guess like some kind of issues with the connection or something. But I missed like all of that. Some of the things I thought were with this story. You excuse me because I actually haven't, because I don't remember exactly what you said at the time, because I didn't go back and reread that, re-listen to that one. But just shows how prepared we are.
Let's see. Yes, everybody, you are in witness of 2 professionals.
Just professional. So anyway, but some of the things I thought was the story. It's one of those stories where you see a lot of people will reference to it being inspirations for people writing some of their other stories. Like me myself, I have looked at it and I got inspired to write one of my stories for it, my story Brand New World. And I actually say, yeah, this was inspired because of In Love with the Gardner, and it was just so amazing that I just felt like I just wanted to write something. And yeah, In Love with the Gardner is one of those stories where people will talk about it so much, and you, like, anytime with these RWBY stories, you will always have people talking about speaking. Can I do it? But you will always have people be talking about this story because it's one of those stories that is recognizable. It's one of the stories that it's well known. A lot of people have read it, and a lot of people, like I said, have gathered some of their own inspiration from it. But some of the things I like, I would have to say that I would feel like need to be worked on in the story is the way that the story, it hasn't updated in a while, and the last update had it where it's like the story is not going to be updating, and so that's kind of disappointing. And it ends on a sour note. It ends on a note where it's incomplete. You don't know what's going on. You want to see something, but it's just like, okay, what happens next? And you find out, oh, there's not going to be any more. Well, great. That's disappointing that it's not going to be continuing, because I actually want to know what happens. I do like the way the story is handled, though. It's really well written, in my opinion, and just the overall like emotion of things. It like you can't help but feel like tangled in it. And it seems like it's one of those stories where you feel like, is this like this has to be real, can be real life, because it's just that well written that you feel like, oh my god, this could actually happen to me at some point, and I could actually be in this situation because of the way it's written. Some of the other thing, the only other thing I would say is like some of the way that's actually written is that I feel, see, when I was taught to when I was had to do a script writing class for my school, was taught that when you do write dialogue, write it in a way where it seems like it's actual people speaking. And I feel like sometimes, even with a lot of stories, it's like it's written in a way that it's like a book, like you are reading a book, but it's one of those things where when I try to write, I write it in a sense where, okay, this is how people would normally talk, so just write that way. And so from there, it's just like, okay, well, I write what comes naturally. And that's just listening, even if it's just like listening to people, you just, okay, this is how you speak, this is how people speak like this, so, alright, I'll just write that. You got any comments?
I will say the comments from me about this story. This is probably going to be one of those ones where Icy Rose, there were a lot of debate points on, which is the reason that I picked it.
Yeah.
This, not so much.
Yeah.
So this probably will be over much shorter, much faster than Icy Rose was, but definitely I am one of those people that's in the I wrote a story because of In Love with the Gardner. And that story, I remember when it eclipsed it, I just laughed because I'm like, yeah, no, this shouldn't be happening. And definitely, I do agree with you.
Yeah,
on
recently
the,
I've heard of
writing stuff.
I don't know. I'm pretty sure you've heard of this, but have you recently? There's been a lot. Like I've been seeing points where where it's a story. You hear something like, and you say like, how good is the story? And it's like, oh, this is October Storm good. And you know that story. It's a really well written. It's a well written story, and one of those.
Just gonna go fangirl. RWBY.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's like this. Like you hear stories like October Storm, like In Love with the Gardner, and they're always referenced to because those are the stories that are like some of the most iconic, I guess, on here. Where you see it and it's like, oh my god, I have to read this. This is amazing. This is one of those stories where you can't put it down. You can't just let it just be like, oh, maybe I'll read it. Maybe I won't read it. It's like one of those ones where it's like,
I definitely would put In Love with the Gardner in probably the most referenced story. Not in other stories maybe, but definitely the most referenced story up there with oh my god, I forgot. Blood Rose. There we go.
yeah.
I probably would put it in like the same category where In Love with the Gardner I see referenced a lot, and I remember especially early on when it was Blood Rose that was pretty much referenced every single chance that somebody got.
Yeah.
And somebody was like, oh, then there's Blood Rose. And In Love with the Gardner is definitely like that. It's pretty heavily referenced overall.
Yeah.
Fuck.
I think because it's one of those stories where it's like a lot of people have read it and it's really well known, and so it's like, yeah, I'll reference it because it's basically like paying homage to one of the great stories out there, in my opinion. In Love with the Gardner is definitely a great story, and it's one of those ones where people can read it and they can see why White Rose is a really great pairing in a sense. It's one of those ones where it's like you can just get immersed in it and it's like, oh my god, this is amazing. Why? I was like, I want to write something just like this. And that's why you see a lot of stories talk about it. It's like it's from the standpoint, it's one of those stories where it's like, okay, I want to write something that's just as good as this. And there are some stories that have done that. There are some stories that haven't done that, but I say just keep trying, man. Don't if it is good or if it isn't as good, just go for it. That's what I say.
In Love with the Gardner, I would like to point out, was also published November 5th, and it is still a top 20 most followed story, and it's probably still a top 20 most favorited story. Or no, it's not. I know that. Actually, no, that it's not. So I mean, it definitely is. I mean, it's kind of, this one was kind of like the rise of fluff, which has doomed a lot of stories actually. But the rise of fluff for RWBY fan fiction, where after that one was published, you definitely saw a wave kind of come in, and I was a part of that wave. I'll be honest, I moved with the crowd.
I was a part of that wave as well.
So. But I am definitely would say, and you did bring up natural feeling. That's one of the biggest issues that I have, and I knew I had to work this into the series somehow with an author that's pretty well known that everybody really seems to like, called Sidereal. Hang on, yes, Sidereal. None of the way that writes for the most part, it doesn't ever feel natural to me, because it's always like big words, and just every other word is like 15 syllables. It seems a bit absurd, but I do say EleaDancingOnAPin, I'm guessing that her name is Elea, is very, very good about making sure that everything seems natural. But any other points that you would like to bring up? Any other points that you'd like to bring up for this story?
For this story, yeah. For one of the stories, for this story, it's just one of those stories where, in my opinion, it's like, yeah, you're gonna have a lot of people referencing to it, because the way that it's written from a standpoint that it was in the early stages of when RWBY was, or it was done right after RWBY Volume 1 was finished. So I guess it's riding off the coattails of how successful RWBY Volume 1 did. And it's one of those things where it's like, in my opinion, it did really well. It did really well to sort of project this fluff wave that you said that we have, because we did have a giant fluff wave. I was a part of that, you were part of that.
We're still in the middle of it.
we still have a giant part of that fluff wave. But it's one of those things where it's like, you're gonna be you'll hear about it a lot, because it's one of those stories where if you don't hear it and you don't look at it, you're really missing out on a great story. You got some more stone behind you. But yeah, I definitely think that this story is one of my personal favorite stories. I can tell you that right now. It is definitely one of my personal favorite stories. And it's a personal favorite of mine because when I first read it, I was just like, oh my god, this is amazing. Why is there no more of this? It's when it comes to stories for me, if it can captivate me and if I feel like it's just like I just get entranced by it, then I feel like the story did a good job then. Because if it's like one of those stories where you're just like,
pulled an all-nighter to finish reading that.
Huh?
I pulled an all-nighter to finish reading that. That's one thing that I do remember about it.
I remember when I first read it, it was Thanksgiving break for me for school, and so I was just like, okay, I was sitting around not doing much, was reading stories. I wasn't writing at that point, but I was just reading. But yeah, it's one of those ones where it's like, I felt like this is what I wanted to write as good as that, and I wanted to write as good as some of the other amazingly good stories I've read. And so it's one of those ones where you can get easily inspired by it. And also, I think like the way that she writes each of the characters, I think it's a good way. It's written pretty well. And like in the first chapter, Yang is teasing Yang and thinking up ways to torture her little sister, but she still is being that big sister that she's still being that big sister that she is to RWBY. So it's one of those things where it's like, okay, this is I'll be this way and I'll be acting like a bit of a jerk, but at the same time I'll act like a sister because you need me to act like a sister. And so yeah, it has a good mix of between those two things, and so that's one reason why I feel it's another reason why it's good, because of the way that everything's written. All the characters are written well, all the way people behave seems natural. And so it's one of those stories where I feel like it's well written. It seems like everything is written for a purpose, And yeah, there are some chapters where it seems a little like it doesn't seem really to fit, but it actually does fit in a sense that it's basically the fourth and fifth chapter when Ruby is trying to get Weiss to open up more and be more comfortable around her, I guess. You get what I mean? Hello? Hello?
Yeah, my mic just like dead dropped. So I heard fourth and fifth chapter when, and I believe those were the chapters addressing the faunus, right?
Those are chapters when when Ruby's dealing with Weiss's faunus issue, and it's also the chapter that Weiss is sick, and so Ruby is taking care of her. And it's just I feel like those chapters are written pretty well from the standpoint. It's like, okay, trying to get Weiss to open up more, trying to get Weiss to feel more comfortable with things that are going on in the world. So I'm trying to get Weiss to, live life more openly. Yeah? Yeah. With chapters 4 and 5, Weiss, that's the chapters that Ruby's dealing with Weiss's issue against the faunus, and Weiss ending up being sick, so Ruby has to take care of her. It's two of those chapters where Ruby is, I guess, trying to make Weiss feel more comfortable around her and trying to get Weiss to open up to more ideas, in a sense. You know what I mean? But one of those chapters, while they don't seem to necessarily fit in the story, that's the beauty about the story. It's that it still fits, and you just have to see the underlying reason behind it, I guess.
You don't realize that it fits until 4 or 5 chapters later, or until some chapters later.
Yeah, you don't realize how it fits until later on, and it's like, oh, this all makes sense now. Everything makes sense. The cake is not actually a lie. Obscure photo reference.
Getting one of those references.
Yep, always got to get a reference in. I mean, what kind of person would I be? I'd be a dirty blue.
Yeah.
Yeah. Alright. Other than that, I really just got nothing else that I feel like I could say other than what my rating is for the story.
Alrighty. Well, overall rating out of 10.
Overall rating out of 10, I give it a 9.5 out of 10. Definitely one of my favorite stories. Definitely well written. Definitely deserves it. If you do not read this story, I will just be like, what is wrong with you?
I think I gave it a 9 out of 10. I don't remember exactly, but I do think I gave it a 9 out of 10. So that'll conclude this story. So, barring on any technical difficulties, we will be jumping right into the next one. And this is going to be the final story, and it was slightly spoiled earlier. A Red Stained Remnant by Karagor 2.
Yep.
On the world of Remnant, in the city of Vale, there is a school for hunters and huntresses. This is the story of 4 girls at Beacon who dream of fighting monsters.
So this is actually one of those cases where the summary really doesn't do a good job at summarizing the plot. So I'll just go ahead and summarize a little bit right now. Basically, it's Team RWBY shortly after RWBY gets appointed as leader. There's the brief little conflict about RWBY being the leader, and then after that, there's a bigger conflict where a giant Beowulf somehow got into Vale, and they have to figure out how. So I will let you take it from there.
Well, yeah, going back to what you were saying about the summary, I think the summary does a good job. It doesn't give you too much, but at the same time, it's like, this seems interesting. Don't want to spoil too much while keeping things still interesting, at least. So, in regards to that summary, I think the summary was all right.
I think that the summary's fine. It just makes my job harder.
Yeah. Well, that's what we got to do. Anyway, but overall with the story, the thing with the story is that everything develops at a certain pace, and that pacing I feel it's a really good pace for the way things are handled. It doesn't want to rush things but at the same time, it does want to make progress on the story, and it does a good job of making progress. Okay, and
It's not with fire comes shadow.
yeah, it's one of the stories where you feel like it. Yeah, as you said it, it's one of those ones where it's like it's gonna happen. Nope, it doesn't happen, and then it doesn't actually happen until the end of the story. But
Spoilers.
But yeah. Okay, all right. Let's try this again.
I think it actually says it in the description anyway, so whatever.
Yeah.
Oh wait. Oh. Yeah, no, it says romance, so everything's like.
It's one of those moments where you don't necessarily know when it's gonna happen, but you feel like it's gonna happen. It feels like, oh my God, is this the chapter where this finally takes off? Is it finally gonna happen? No, it'll take some time, and it'll be like, okay, it's gonna happen. It's gonna happen. Nope. It's gonna happen now. It's gonna happen now. Nope. It's gonna happen. It's gonna happen. Nope. And you'll get that a lot, but it is worth it though, because the way that everything comes to fruition, it's just I definitely feel like it's one of those stories where it's like, okay, it's worth the read. It's definitely worth the read. It definitely has captured my interest. It's just I've actually said in my story, say like, oh God, lava, no, oh shit, okay, come on, don't die on me, sorry about that, I'm burning up, and I just need to get help. But anyway, where was I? Oh, it's one of those stories where I felt so captivated by it that I didn't see why it wasn't more recognized than it was. It's one of those. It's the only story that we're talking about that actually has a plot line to it. So that's
that is true when you put it that way.
It's the only story that we have that actually has a plot line, and it actually has a consistent transgression, and everything just keeps progressing onward. And it's one of those stories where it's like, okay, that it's moving on, it keeps going. It's not just like scattered random. It's one of those ones where you can see you don't know what's going to happen, but you know something is going to happen. And it's like, when it does happen, you want to know what happened and how it was fixed or something.
Yeah, one of the big things with that story for me was always that there were a lot of things in there that I didn't necessarily expect. When things did happen, I hadn't really heard of them before. So when they did happen, it was made more intriguing by the fact that I couldn't have guessed what happened. The big one being aura shock for me, as referenced it earlier. That was definitely one of my favorite ideas that he had done.
Yeah, it's definitely has a lot of original concepts behind it. The idea of the giant very powerful Grimm is a great idea. The aura shock is a great idea. Even the semblance that the bad guy had, it was a really interesting semblance, very unique.
Don't say what it was, but I think his name was Mika or something.
Merca, something like that.
I want to say Mika, but I know that's The Walking Dead.
Yeah, but it definitely a lot of originality involved in the story, and I thought that was really great, the way that the way of how original a lot of the ideas were. And it's like even some of the ideas in the way that
it's probably the most underrated story on the website to me, despite the fact that it has 182 followers. I think that it's still one of the more underrated ones.
I
actually going to brag a little bit. I actually gave him one of the ideas for the end, the way that it all ended. That was me inspired for part of that.
Awesome. Yeah, I've definitely been promoting this story on my own story, on my story Life of White Rose. I've definitely been like, okay, you guys, seriously, go read this story because this is absolutely amazing. It's my favorite story out there.
I must have skipped over those ANs.
Yeah, those ANs. Yeah, I already know about that. But it's one of those things where it's just really well written, and I definitely think it's my recommendation of the video. It's definitely my recommendation. I'm gonna say that even above In Love with the Gardner, it is my recommendation of this video, go watch this. Or no, not well. Go watch this, obviously, but go read, go read this story. It is really well written. It is truly an amazing story. You will fall in love with the story immediately, and if not, then I don't know what to say. At least, and this is all what I feel about it, and I definitely feel like it's worth the read. Truly
Now,
amazing
I know
story.
that's what you all feel about this, and I do love the story. I think this was episode 1, and it was my recommendation of the video. But I'm going to address some things that I remember addressing. I felt as though that there were a lot of internal conflicts, like within a character, that was just swept under that was addressed way too easily. Like I remember, especially. With Blake, I felt more than anything else because the spotlight was definitely on Blake for a fair majority of the story. But I definitely think, like, especially at the end, I'm not going to say what the end was, but there were just a lot of things that were swept underneath the rug. It was kind of like, oh, okay, this all worked out, and we're just going to keep going. Did you have that issue with this?
With how internal conflicts were resolved pretty quickly in the story.
Yes.
Is that what you're saying? Yeah. There are some cases where it happens like that, but there are also some cases where you'll have an internal conflict that'll be going on, and I can think of one, Weiss's continued transition of whether or not what she feels for Ruby is one of the issues that it won't get resolved quickly. It'll get resolved after a lot of chapters have passed by, and the story does have a lot of issues where the internal conflicts are solved too quickly. I feel like there's also a lot of those conflicts that are they just take forever to resolve, and I actually think that's a good thing because then it's like, all right, well, this is a good thing.
Internal conflicts are definitely excuse me, sorry. Internal conflicts are definitely something that I feel as though are better off left resolved longer than shorter. Longer makes more sense than shorter.
Yeah, because basically, we as people are not going to be able to know what to do about something right away. So it's like, okay, well,
the final chapters, I will say, I'm just going to ask your opinion on this. The final chapters all felt really rushed to me, like as though it was almost a rush to get it over with. And I don't mean because at the end there is a big battle. Spoiler alert, not really. I think that actually the chapters are named that after that. The final showdown battle begins, where's that, all this stuff. But I felt as though the chapters 29 and 30, which is the Cat and the Flame, the Ice Queen, and the Rose, those all felt really rush job to me, as though it was trying to get over, rather than kind of taking a little bit more time. Like those probably could have been benefited from 2 or 3 more chapters to address those conflicts. What do you stand on that?
What do I think? I think it was actually fine the way, like how fast paced it was. This is gonna be me speaking from a media major perspective because that's what I studied in school. You want after the climax moment and the conflict, and then everything just afterwards has to get. You can't take too long to settle things out afterwards because then everyone's gonna be like, okay, the story's pretty much over. You can end it now. But it's like, you know how some with like movies you'll have that climax moment and then afterwards there's like maybe 10-15 minutes left in the whole movie with things getting resolved. Then it's just like that. It's like you have the battle, which you mentioned already, and then you have the last 2 chapters being the Ice Queen, the Rose, and the Cat and the Flame, and those 2 chapters, and it settles. There's really at that point in time, there's only 2 issues that really need to be resolved, and that's the 2 different relationships within Team RWBY, and though it dedicates a chapter to settling each of the issues, and I think that the way it was handled was perfectly fine. I mean, if anything, if you wanted to make it a bit longer, you could show like what happened, like in not. Oh, I'm trying to think of. You could try to have it be like, okay, you could take like one more chapter to show what happens afterwards and show like, okay, this is where things were and this is how everything has gone, after and like take like a chapter to show like an epilogue of what happened from Ruby and Weiss's and Blake and Yang's perspective.
Yeah, I see what you mean. I probably should have been a little bit more specific. My biggest issue was, and I will say it now, Cat in the Flame. Because I do understand what you mean by climax, but I'm fine so long as at the end I feel satisfied. But with this one, after the Cat in the Flame, you had the big moment at the end of the chapter. And I remember very specifically thinking after that, I'm excited to read the next chapter and see how this big moment resolves. And then the next chapter didn't even touch upon it. And then there was just no more mention of it. And I think I will say it was, I believe, the last sentence of the story. Yes, it was the last sentence of the story, or of that chapter. And I remember reading that and getting even more excited for the chapter after that, because thinking, just in my mind, I was saying, I'll cut it out of the video, but what it is. And then it was never touched upon again.
Yeah, I can see what you mean by that. It's like finally revealing to Yang Blake's biggest secret, and it's like, yeah, I can see what you mean by that. It's like not touching up on it, but you know what? Actually, I realized something I felt like from when this story ended, that epilogue. I feel like there's gonna be another story that's gonna come out after this story. It's like a sequel. I feel like there is, but if there isn't, then it's a resolved the way it is, and it ends the way it is. But yeah, I can see what you mean by that, where it ended that way, and that gives it like, okay, it's you don't know what happened, but at the same time you could tell, like, from the way Yang and Blake are interacting with each other even after Blake has basically revealed that secret. It doesn't necessarily change. Nothing really seems to change between Blake and Yang. So I got the impression it's like, oh well, Blake showed it and Yang was just like, okay, well, I see nothing wrong with this, so all right. It's one of those things where it's like, all right, you don't have to. I feel like you didn't have to say anything about it and just implied that things work themselves out.
And that's actually another thing. I, for some reason, thought that earlier in the story, I remember getting really confused because I thought that Blake had already revealed. Oh, wait. Shit. Cut that out. I remember thinking earlier in the story that the thing that happened in the last chapter had already happened, or the Cat in the Flame. I remember thinking that it had already happened, and then learning that it hadn't actually happened, and I remember just being really confused. That was like one. That was probably just me not paying enough attention. But I do remember thinking about that, and it was just kind of progressed strangely sometimes. So, any final or any other things that you would like to address?
I don't really. There's really nothing else left to address, really, because this story, it's done. It's an amazingly done story, and pretty much I don't see anything else really that's wrong with it. Hold on, let me see if I have anything. The only thing I would say about that, it'll start a bit slow. Just, it happens. It's a bit of a slow start to the beginning of the story, but it does. I don't think it takes away from the quality of the story as a result of it. But
Chapter 5, picks up.
Yeah, things start to pick up after what you said. After chapter 5, everything starts to pick up. And after
first.
It's of course, but it's like one of those things where it's like, okay, it's a great story. It has a great start to it. I mean, the start is pretty good. It's just one of those things where it's like, okay, it starts a bit slow, but it just happens. Don't worry about if it starts slow or not. It's still worth the read. Even he says, if you don't feel like reading these first few chapters, just skip on over to chapter 5, because that's when the chapters start to pick up. But I give it a read at least once, just in case anyway, because just to form your own opinion on it.
I prefer the slow starts because generally the slow starts means that I don't have to pick anything up as time goes on. That was my biggest issue. I remember with Ruin, book 1 of the Rending trilogy. the fact that you were thrown into the middle of everything so quickly that you didn't have time to properly feel for the characters that he was deciding to craft. While in this time, he gave you time, and I actually really appreciate that, and I don't mind it. The slower starts. Anyways,
Yeah.
out of 10 overall rating.
9.8.
9.8.
Definitely the best rating. Definitely great rating, and barring like those minor one or two details, then it's just really amazing. It's a really great story, and again, it's my recommendation of the video.
And with that, that is going to conclude Cody Talks Fanfiction episode number 8. I'm just going to go ahead and say this now. Nobody else will care, but I'm going to say that the raw file for this is an hour and 9 minutes long, so I'm kind of excited to see how long this is going to be after I edit everything down.
Oh man, so much
This is gonna
editing.
be a bitch export. There's going to be a lot of editing to this, so let me know if you guys think that this is a good idea, that I should continue on with the idea of doing this in the future. Also, if you are an author that has some form of credibility to your name, then and you would like to participate in this, let me know, and I will try and work you into a future one. Everybody, don't hate on me for this episode. I gave almost no opinions. Everybody hate on Noble, and otherwise tune back in next week where I will cover a new batch of stories. Bye.
Yeah, go hate on me.